Welcome back, welcome in, welcome all to the Like That podcast, episode 24. This time not joined by Nick, but myself and Brooklyn. Brooklyn, last episode, I gave a happy birthday shout out to Nick. We recorded on his birthday, also almost his golden birthday, episode 23, on the day he turns 24. But also missed your birthday. You guys, how many days apart are you guys total?
2. I'm older than Nick by 2 days.
So happy late birthday to you there. Do anything
Thank
nice
you,
for your
thank you.
birthday? I know you've been out the last 2 weeks. So what's new with you?
Other than starting school recently, that is actually how I started my birthday. Was first off, a 6 a.m. morning workout. If you know me, or even if you don't know me, I don't typically do that or enjoy doing that, but that's kind of become my new I have to. And then school started, so I had my first class at 8:45. So 6 a.m. workout. You got both dogs in your bed now.
Yep, well, both of them joined. They love listening to the podcast.
Perfect. Glad we got some fans. Yeah, but workout right into some school, right into, and so far school's been great, by the way. And right after that, had to go work, from my two classes for the classes I coach, 4 and 5:45. So I had a full day starting at 5 a.m. and ending very early at like 9:30.
Well, there's nothing more I'd want to do on my birthday than force myself to go to the gym earlier than I wake up, then get stuck in class and assigned homework, and then clock in to make some money at the end of it. Seems like you had the everything you'd want on a birthday list.
It took me such and such years to get my birthday to finally be on like a Saturday and or Friday, Saturday, and Sunday, and we started back on Monday, so we're gonna have to wait a while before I see that weekend come up again.
Hey, we're gonna go nuts for your 33rd birthday. Don't worry. We'll go stupid as long as your back is still there. But yeah, what have we missed since the last time we spoke? Not too much. Again, you really missed the majority of NFL free agency. We went through a lot of that. Um,
Been keeping up with it.
the most recent thing that has happened in between our last episode and now, the Jalen Waddle trade to Denver. That's not something I expected on Denver. I mean, I know they're already paying Cortland Sutton a lot of money, but that really does change the dynamics of that offense in a big way. And on the flip side of Miami, I mean, if you're Malik Willis, I don't know how excited you are to sign that contract now.
Basically, I mean, you have a target on your back every single game. Like you're the guy the ball is going to. You are basically. I mean, he's stepping up into it, but it's just that team is ugly.
But how, when you saw the Waddle reactions, how much does that change your perspective on Denver? I know this is a podcast notorious for, taking a dump on Denver in their success, but I do think this is a really, really good move for the Broncos. I think it might hurt them long term financially, but in the short term, you're giving Knicks another weapon. That's going to help out the offense no matter what.
Absolutely, and for a team that already was so good at controlling the pace of play, and really, their defense was the star of the show, and they didn't really lose much of anything, on that front. And now you just add a lethal weapon into your receiving room, and that's already building on top of what you have from last year. Um, Denver's just got, to me, legitimately scary to face on both sides of the ball. Cortland Sutton, when he could make plays, great, and when Knicks could have those types of games where he is throwing, average yard of attempt, beyond 7 yards, like now you can really kind of see that being implemented, especially with the route running of Jalen Waddle. So yeah, that team just got much scarier to face overall, and it's not even just on defense anymore.
Yeah, you don't have to worry about Lil Jordan Humphrey being your wide receiver too going into the playoffs. So
Little
that's
Jordan
big.
Humphrey, Little Jordan Humphrey like highlights I saw this year. One of them, being starting off on the Giants, where he had like I think a 1 or 2 touchdown game, and then just starts popping off randomly for Denver. I was like, okay, just it's just so funny to see some of those guys randomly step up.
Well, enjoy watching it in the past because I don't know how much we'll see in the future. But on this episode, what are we talking about? Of course, we're going through our teams of the weeks, our players of the week, and then we're going to be talking about some teams that we think are going to be playoff pretenders. Maybe losing in the first round or high seeds we don't really think are, as scary as the seeding looks. And then we're going to dive into our way too early NFL team props. Again, we haven't seen the draft yet, but looking at free agency, seeing if there's any lines that really stick out to you. And there are a couple here that we're going to bring up. But before we jump into all of that, by the time that most people are probably listening to this, we're in the middle of March, or probably the beginning of March Madness. I know that you're probably expecting, one of the biggest times of years or biggest times of the year for, basketball being, March Madness. And it's not really something that we're going to be covering, to be honest with you. This is a group that I don't know about you specifically, Brooklyn. Like every year I make a bracket, I make a couple, but when it comes to college basketball, I really tune in specifically during March, and then outside of that, I'm really just looking towards, once we're in the NBA draft type of year, and that's when I'm like looking back on these players to see what they're capable of as they're gonna fit into an NBA roster. But did you make a bracket this year?
And just like you said, like we are a team. We are a group that, loves our sports and especially basketball is one of the biggest ones. But when it comes to collegiate sports, I definitely am not able to keep tabs on the amount of teams that do end up doing like the amount of teams that there are really to root for. Historically, I've always been a Duke guy. I've always rooted for Duke, and that even stems back to the Grayson Allen days. Which I'm not saying Grayson Allen was the guy I was rooting for on Duke, but I was a Duke fan through the Grayson Allen era. Um, Whatever that says about me as a college basketball fan. But if I were to look at a team this year that I think like might go all the way, I do have to actually point fingers right at Duke. And you could say, why am I not pointing fingers at BYU? I just think that the way that Duke's been able to historically perform, especially now being the one first team, sorry, the best team in the East. They get an easy matchup, but I'm not going to say that upsets can't happen, but I don't see Siena giving them trouble. And just throughout that entire all those matchups they might face in the first couple rounds, I think Duke has a chance to just go right to the Final Four, and eventually I will always pick Duke to really make a good run.
Yeah, like again, I'm not the guy to go to when it comes to college basketball advice. I have picked a correct bracket winner though in years past. Shout out Baylor. But if you ask me right now, like my bracket that I submitted, I actually picked Michigan to go all the way. Again, you're talking to two guys that just picked the front runner to win the tournament and the runner up to win the tournament. Both I think Duke and Michigan sit like under plus 400 odds to win it all. But to me, March Madness, again, you look at BYU, you think about like Debanza, you look at Duke, and obviously like they're star-studded with Boozer and the cast there. But I feel like a lot of the times it comes down to just like a well-rounded team. Not necessarily they're going to have a guy that's going top 5 in the draft, but a team that's just built really, really well all around, and that's where I think Michigan falls. It's not the prettiest pick. It's not an exciting pick, but I hope I win money in my friend's bracket league because of it. So
how many brackets you got going?
Only 2. I picked Michigan in the one that usually I do like one that is my best judgment, and then I do one that I think would be a little bit more entertaining. And for that one, I took UConn. Maybe a little bit of home bias there, but I think that realistically they got screwed out last year on some last minute decisions there, but I think they can make an interesting run.
Fair. And I'm not gonna say that they're my runner-up pick for like behind Duke, who I think could really make a run for it would be, and it's probably a popular team, Houston, the Cougars. They're a team they played well as a unit as well. You want to talk about teams that are just a relatively good unit? I see that dog springing up back there. Kingston Fleming's and that entire team. I've watched a bunch of Houston games. Like they can start lighting up scoring by they can start lighting up scoring whenever they feel like it. And also one of the best defensive teams in college basketball. So, and that's all I really care to touch upon, for college basketball. Again, it's not really my expertise, my cup of tea, but definitely a time of year where I start to pay a lot more attention to it.
I think based off of what we're hearing, I think Rosie is not a fan of Houston. So maybe that's a fade. Bark if you think Michigan goes all the way.
She's definitely a BYU fan.
You hear that?
Did she bark?
She's growling a little bit. Go blue. Let's go blue.
Go blue.
But she better tone it down. But let's jump into our teams of the week. Had to get rid of the special guest making too much noise, but again, a believer in Michigan, and that's all I need to hear. But my team of the week, I'm going to be talking about the Los Angeles Lakers here. In their last 10, 9-1 against the spread, and you're talking about wins over the Knicks, the Timberwolves, and the Nuggets in that stretch. All of those games projected as dogs. So they're covering the spread as favorites, but also not only covering as dogs, but they're just outright winning these games. In the last 10 games, you're seeing the Lakers as fourth in true shooting percentage, fourth in points, sixth in opponents' points per game. If you filter team stats based off the last 10 games, you're going to see the Lakers across the board in some way in the top 10. So a team that is exceeding expectations as of late, but the surprising aspect of that to me was the opponent's points per game. I feel like the Lakers are really never known as a defensive first type of team, but around Luka, they've set those role players up to succeed. So the Lakers on a little bit of a hot stretch right now, and that might not be a good team to face heading into the playoffs.
Yeah, and it's one that I think was the main thing I had a problem with them with in the beginning, not the beginning of the year, but as of like last couple months, is they just weren't an amazing team defensively. But obviously offensively, they have the weapons to keep or to make up for some of the volume they might let up on defense. My team of the week, and it hurts me in every way to say it, is going to be the Boston Celtics. And with Tatum's return, everything's just been so exciting for them. And honestly, when I just look at the resiliency that they've had all year, and now just getting this major addition back, and well, the addition back, the team back. Not saying that Jaylen Brown is not part of that team. It's really a 50-50 share there. But Boston, out of their last 30 games, that's a lot, right? We're going back a while. They have won their 21 of their last 30, and if you look at teams that get streaky, teams that can either win one, lose one, win one, lose one. To win 21 of your last 30 games is just insane. And they're not going against teams that are just like, oh, the Dallases, the Wizards of the crew. Like they played against the Knicks, they played against the Lakers, they beat the Lakers by a comfortable margin there. I know that, and they did lose to some of the stronger teams, but the thing is they're competing with some of those stronger teams, and this is prior to Tatum coming back as well. So and just in the last 10 alone, Boston is 7-3 against the spread, and this has just been a team that's, I think, shocked most of, and Nico and I were talking about this earlier before we started recording, most of the league and basketball fans with just how good that they've been able to play without Tatum. Now they have him back. To me, they probably are the scariest team to face in the Eastern Conference right now. We'll talk about one of them in just a moment, but Boston definitely has got to be my team of the week, team of the year. You can almost say it right now.
Well, yeah, I think we touched upon it last episode a little bit too. How going into the year, the Celtics win total was at like 41.5. And what we were speaking about before we started recording was talking about, AJ DeBanza. And I was like, yeah, there was a decent amount of Celtics media that was thinking, Tatum's out the year, like looking at the roster going into the year, like this might not be the best team, and it might be worth, if you're not going to finish first, finish last, thinking maybe they can tank and jump into the lottery. But instead, Jaylen Brown took over as that number one and really proved some doubters wrong throughout this year. And yeah, Tatum's ahead of schedule. So this went from a team that going into the year you were like, oh, maybe they make it out of the play-in, maybe they don't make the playoffs at all, to now a team that, if you're according to DraftKings, is the highest odds to make it out of the East. So
here's my next question, and obviously, like we're in the same group chats, and I said this the other night, and I cannot bear, this comes from me being a Nets fan. Like, Nets commentators have never been crazy biased, and NBC Sports Boston was like one of the most biased like streams I had ever seen, and they were just hyping up JB, saying that Jaylen Brown should seriously be considered as a candidate for MVP. How does that sentence, like, do you think that there's actual merit that Jaylen Brown should be considered a contender or a candidate for the MVP?
Well, so the MVP, I think the question starts at how you grade the MVP, because I think there's two thought process on it. Like, there's some people that say the MVP goes to the most valuable player, and the guy that's made the most impact. And I think Jaylen Brown has a very good argument for that. I think the same arguments you can make about Jaylen Brown, you can make about Cade Cunningham. Guys that are just like single-handedly putting their team in the position they are now. I mean, I know Jalen Duren's been good for Detroit at the same time, and Derek White has been great for the Celtics. But, Jaylen Brown is, he's got career highs in points, assists, rebounds. He's shooting a little bit worse, but on a much higher volume without Tatum. So if you argued who is the most valuable player to their team, I think Jaylen Brown does make a good case there. But I'm not somebody that votes that way when it comes to MVP. I think MVP should be the best player, just based, I'm an analytics guy first, and I think it's tough to say that, Jaylen Brown statistically is performing better than Nikola Jokic or Shai Gilgeous-Alexander. So I think he deserves to be in the conversation, but I don't think he should walk away with the MVP trophy.
So, according to Basketball Reference's top 10 candidates, do you want to hear how it goes in order here?
If it was my order would be, as it stands now, I would do Jokic, SGA, then I would put Jaylen Brown, and then like Cade, probably Luka at 5.
So if I were just gonna go, and I'll even go through the top 10 because this is kind of crazy. Number one, Jokic, you got that. SGA obviously is going to be the runner-up, if not the one behind or in front of Jokic. Then it goes Luka at 3, Cade at 4, Wemby at 5, Jalen Duren at 6, Chet at 7, Jalen Johnson at 8, Cat at 9, and then Brunson at 10. Now Jokic, Wemby are currently not on pace to play 65 games, so that takes 2 out of the picture. So Brown could easily be snuck into, that top discussion. I'm absolutely shocked at some of the names I just read off of that list for the MVP award tracker.
Hey, I'm not crazy surprised. There you look back through NBA history and you'll see like random top 10 NBA finishes. I don't think it's something that's really cared that much about. Realistically, it's your top 3 and then that's it. Like think about like 2011 MVP race. You had D Rose take it home. You had LeBron that people think was robbed of one, and then you have Kobe. But do you remember who was 6th? Do you remember who was 8th? It's not the most important thing in the world, but yeah, it'd be cool to see Jaylen Brown win it, but I don't think he deserves it. And as it shows now, it doesn't look like he's got good odds. But yeah, talking our teams of the week. Shout out the Lakers. Shout out Boston. But what are our bad teams? Who's been struggling as of late?
For me, I had to highlight, and it's interesting for me to say this, and I see that we both have teams who are, among the top in their conferences. For this one, I went with the Cavs, and it's a team that it's dangerous to talk bad about the Cavs with the success that they have had this year, but it's also they've been a little streaky recently. Some bad losses and some narrow victories against teams that they have no business keeping it close with. Milwaukee, last night they just pulled off like an 8-point win. Lost to Dallas by 10 in a game where Donovan Mitchell and Evan Mobley were healthy. I did not see if Harden was in that game, even though they did beat Dallas 2 nights before that. But it's not like they were on a back-to-back. But then to give one up to Dallas as the Cavs, I think is kind of crazy. Losing to Orlando, I know Orlando has flashes, but I don't think that that's a team that you compare them with Cleveland. It's necessarily a team where I'm like, I think Orlando should pull that game out. Lost to Boston. I mean, you want to talk about if you're going to be able to compete when it comes down to the playoffs race, and if you can make it into the semis and the conference finals, and you're going to see a team that might just be Boston. That was an ugly game. I think at halftime they had made like 2 threes. They were like 2 for 20 something. Charles Barkley, I saw that whole game, was just like they just literally look like they're not competing.
Well, you could also say one of the crazier parts of that game was that at halftime they're ripping the Cavs on how bad they're shooting, and Shaq hits a 3.
Yes.
Shaq's like, if you give me 22 attempts, I can make more than 3, and I think his second or third shot he made it.
Kenny said out of 10, I think Shaq hits at least 1, and it was his second attempt. Shaq hits his second 3. Meanwhile, Sam Merrill's out here shooting the lights on. Narrow victory against Brooklyn on March 1st. They only won by 4 points, and against Detroit they lost one, but also won one against it. It's just, to me, this is a team I kind of expect more from the Cavs. I really do. You just traded for Harden, and Harden's a guy who can elevate the system around him. You've had Donovan Mitchell, who has been great in his own right for many games this year, and Evan Mobley. Not necessarily saying that he isn't good by any means, especially this year, but I think he needs to be playing a much higher impact than he is. Jared Allen, I know, has had some health issues, but I just don't think that Cleveland's been playing to their strengths. And not just that, they are the worst team against the spread, have a running record of 28-41, and their record as favorites against the spread is 19-36. Among the bottom 5 teams that are worst as favorites, it's the worst teams in the league. No team has seen volume like this as favorites and not been able to do that well, or not been able to pull it off here against the spread. So I think Cleveland's been underperforming by a lot, and it's kind of scary if you think that they're going to make a real playoff run.
Yeah, it's funny because I almost want to include them in our pretenders list, but I have a team that actually matches up pretty similarly when you're talking about projected favorites and not really hitting where they need to be. But the Cavs, like you said before, I feel like this is a team the last 3 years that has been, if you had to give them a grade, they're like a B plus. Like they do a little bit of everything at an above average rate, but they're just not. I think that there's the elite teams in the NBA, and then right under that has been the Cavs, and I don't think that they've been knocking on the door each year, and you think the Harden move really pushes you into that conversation, but I'm not sold there, especially with the age of Harden and how he performs in the playoffs. There's reasons to be scared in Cleveland for sure. And switching the topic over to my bad team of the week, my poop team of the week. It's funny enough that it's an ironic one to say because my first point on them is that they're currently on a 9-game win streak. But the Oklahoma City Thunder, if you were putting your money on them to cover the spread in their last 9 games, they're 1-8. I don't know many times that a team is on a 9-game win streak and they've covered the spread in one of those outcomes. But to stretch it further, I mean, the Thunder, if you look into their schedule, which I have in one of these tabs here, they've done a decent job. Like, again, you can't complain at a team that is, consistently winning games, but they've kept teams in these games, which I think is something that needs to be looked at a little bit further. If you're going on this win streak here now, Orlando, 5-point game, you projected 10.5. You look at, Boston, a narrow 2-point victory. Denver, you win by 3 not in overtime, excuse me, but just about. And that line was at 3.5, so call it a hook. But again, against New York, 3-point game. Like, good teams, don't get me wrong. But at the same time, you're facing Dallas at minus 16.5. You don't make it work. Shea's been missing time. I understand that. And I'm not saying that the Thunder are a bad team, but from the betting perspective, they're in the lottery.
You're saying the Thunder are the Denver Broncos of the NBA.
Yeah, essentially.
I mean, hey, SGA, the numbers he can put up and the amount of aura that man has around his name is just insane. But when I watch him play sometimes, I do see some of those calls where we're like, all right, we're starting to turn foul culture into something that's going to make the game like almost unwatchable.
See, I disagree because last year I went to a Celtics Thunder game in Boston, and the Thunder won. It was a close game through it all, and I think the most impressive thing that I got to see was Shea in real time. Like this guy can essentially get whatever he wants on the court. And I'm not saying through a whistle. He's okay with taking just a pull-up mid-range. He could go and, take a post, like a post fade. I saw him pull that out once, which is my personal favorite move in basketball. But there's
you do it really well.
Yeah,
I want to know your percentage.
Yeah, I wish I could shoot like that. But no, like the guy's just so unstoppable that you do have to foul him. Like, I understand he gets a lot of free throw merchant allegations, but at the end of the day, it's if there aren't fouls there, like this dude could be averaging a lot more than he already is. Like he is from what I've seen, like, I know that like Luka obviously looks great and Jokic is a phenomenal player. But if you have to ask me with my own eyes who is like the best scorer I've seen play, it's SGA.
I will say, SGA has one of the best, if not the best, like stop and go games like I have ever seen in basketball. I think, pioneers of which I've seen the stop and go game like really develop start with him and like D'Angelo Russell. Like those are guys who really starting to like patent the move of like keeping guys on your hip. And if you're a basketball player, you kind of know that strategy. Like, you want to try to get by him, but there's a lot of times where, you're very conscious spatially like of where your defender is. And SGA is really good at, being able to control the pace, the push and pull of the ball. And, free throw merchant, yes. Like I can say that he gets to the line a lot. He's not blowing the whistle. It's the refs who are calling half of those, right? But I have also watched Shea play enough to the point, and, not in person, that's something else, but to the point where I can see, and I can also attest to like how quick he is, how shifty he is, how just aware of his space he is. And it's something that you don't see in most players in basketball. So props off to him to be a player that can move like that, because that's not easy at all. But not going to say that he doesn't get a little bit of benefit on the whistles too.
No, I mean, again, because he has to, because you can't stop the guy. But to recap our teams, again, our teams of the week are the Los Angeles Lakers and the Boston Celtics, and our poop teams of the week are the Cleveland Cavaliers and the Oklahoma City Thunder. But jumping into our players now, who's been doing well on the prop market? We've already been talking some Celtics. We've mentioned Jaylen Brown. I've heard Derek White's name. We've heard Jason Tatum's name. But how about Baylor Shireman? It's my player of the week. Without Tatum, he has had to make some steps up on the minutes side of things. I mean, he didn't really play much last year. Now he's become like a vital role player to the Celtics. But even just looking on the betting side of it, in his last 10 games, over 11.5 points rebounds has gone 9 for 10. You want to stretch that into his last 20 games? That's 16 for 20. And you say, points, rebounds, that's not enough for you. I want his PRAs. PRAs, 13.5. That's also 9 for its last 10. If you look at his box scores, they're not anything crazy. You see a couple 10-point games. You'll see a 12-point game. But the nights where he's not necessarily scoring as much, he's still making an effort on the boards and on the assists. He had a 3-point performance where he went 3 for 9, but he grabbed 9 rebounds in the affair. So somebody that just finds a way to fill up the box score, but not in any specific category. But realistically, if you want to make some coin, you want to take Baylor Shireman in some category of points, rebounds, or PRAs.
Fair enough. And I think that the Celtics have been that's kind of been their thing this year, especially without having to navigate without JT, is like finding random guys to put them in situations to see if they'll do well. You saw
hey,
that
if you
with
could shoot,
Hugo.
Get on the court. That's all they want. You shoot 37% from 3. All right, get ready to learn the corner.
Right, and then but like Hugo, and Hauser's been reliable go-to shooter for them, but like Hugo and now Shireman's been a guy who I watch, and I'm just like, he just fits into that role so well. He's like the typical Luke Kennard, the typical
Luke Kennard, but he's a power forward. He's not gonna put the ball on the ground, but yeah, he's just a white dude that can let it fly.
Yeah, but like he's a very reliable option at that. He's a guy that you go to as much as when you looked at like the Heat series, as much as they went to like Duncan Robinson and Max Strus. Like that's a guy that I think that the Celtics are learning to rely on, and a guy that he shows up when he gets those chances. So absolutely, a shocker pick to see him kind of be doing this well. I wanted to highlight someone on a team that's been shocking us again, right? I was talking about how good Boston's been, but let's talk about the Suns real quick. And they're starting to get pieces back at the right time, especially, with the playoffs, play-ins starting to get a little bit closer. Highlighting one specific guy, though, you're going to shift the focus over to Jalen Green. Yes, I said I had the Magic to win a game against the Suns. And yes, Jalen Green went in 4 for 20-something in one of those made shots.
6 for 26.
That's you can almost say that's the same thing. But yeah, he did go 6 for 26, and he had a rough start coming. Like, he hadn't played literally all year up until those first couple of games, but lately he's been starting to get back on track. And both Devin Booker and him have been something that's been working pretty well. They almost took Boston. They took Boston all the way to the end of the fourth quarter. I know there was a dagger moment in the last minute of that game, but I watched that entire second half all the way through, and that duo of Jalen Green, D-Book was something that was flowing pretty well. So Jalen Green has averaged almost 25 points to his last 7, and then translating that over to the betting side, his line has been just around a little bit over 20.5, maybe up to 22.5. If you were to even take 22.5, which you could consider that a little bit of a reach from, I guess, what he's been averaging since he's been back from injury, that line still would have hit in the last 7 games, 5 out of 7. And again, this is a Suns team that's getting that piece back and this flow back at the right time, because they are right in between play-in /6 seed. And I think Jalen Green, as long as he continues to kind of find this, if he can keep this a little bit more consistent, Suns might be a little bit more of a dangerous team to watch as we go into the playoffs.
I'm always a fan of rooting for like an underdog story, and it's crazy to talk about Jalen Green as an underdog story, but
that is crazy.
Somebody that was drafted insanely high, he ends up not living up to expectations at Houston, and Houston ends up going a different route, shipping him away for a package you typically wouldn't see for a guy that is, I mean. You flip the script and go from Jalen Green to Kevin Durant. I feel like you make that choice every time, but an unfortunate thing for Jalen Green. But again, he's getting his opportunities in Phoenix. I feel like a lot of people didn't expect that really to work well, because I think his game is very similar to Devin Booker's in a way. Outside of the whole you're not seeing Devin Booker try to kill somebody on a dunk, but Jalen Green, again, I root for the guy, and I think Phoenix is a fun team, so I'm happy to see him succeed. To flip the script onto somebody that hasn't succeeded so much, I think your player that you brought to the table is just hilarious. Like I think if you're gonna shit on somebody and it's somebody that I think you ask most NBA fans nowadays who he is. Like I think NBA fans under 12 years old probably don't even know who he is right now.
Yeah, it is really funny because it's like a guy that you'll see on the court, and you're like, oh, and, like at least us, us having some basketball under our belt, like, oh, he's still on that team. Well, and you just watch him play, and you kind of forget about him. But it's been kind of crazy watching Bruce Brown, not do much of anything. And I know last two games, I think he had 12 points, but he's got experience with the Nuggets, and he's got experience in the league. Like he was in the not saying the Nets were anything too crazy. Again, and that's in that Celtics series where they lost, but I mean they did have Durant still. But Bruce Brown was a prominent part of that team, and Bruce Brown was also a prominent part of the Raptors. And now being on a team like Denver, where he was a part of that championship team, I expect more from a guy like that who's been in the league, made it this long in the league, and yet his stats just aren't there. He has a negative net rating overall with Denver, especially this year. And that, I mean, I get it. Your bench guys are not going to be the ones giving a positive value. But if you look at like his points per game, he's averaging right around like 7.8 points per game. 24 minutes per game, though, that's 3 shy of Tim Hardaway, who's almost doubling Bruce Brown's points per game. And I know Tim Hardaway's a shooter, but I'm just looking at what Bruce Brown has done, and it's not much. He's gone 2 for 10 in his last 10 for points. And that line is set right around 6.5 to 7.5. That shows you what his projected ceiling is. So if you took it in the last 2 days, congrats. But if you took it in the last 10, I'm sorry. So yeah, Bruce Brown's a guy that when the Nuggets turn to their depth, I'm not really sure how much value he brings to the court when he's on it.
I think when they re-signed Bruce Brown, a lot of it was like, oh my God, this is going to be like the guy that was a part of our finals run. And realistically, that guy is still on the team, but it is Tim Hardaway. Like Tim Hardaway filled that role. So it's, you bring in Bruce Brown thinking maybe he could, do a little bit of that, still have a little bit of that magic. I know he was out or had dealt with a lot of injuries in that time when he was with the Raptors, but not a guy that, I think Bruce Brown props, they're really pissing off those parlay guys, that you're like, you're watching like Nuggets Thunder and you've already got 5 legs into your lay and you're like, oh, Bruce Brown could go get me 6.
Yeah. You see a number that low and you're like, oh yeah, Bruce Brown, right? 6.5 points. I'm sure he gets me at least 6 points. And like there's a lot of games if you look at his stat logs that he's like put up like maybe 4. And he doesn't have like a crazy shooting volume, and he's never been that kind of guy who's gonna just like pull shots. But I think with 24 minutes per game that's how much time you're seeing on the floor, like, and you're not really adding that much value to it. And I'm not trying to be disrespectful to Bruce Brown, like he's an NBA player, but at the same time, you're getting that much opportunity, you have capabilities, you gotta be doing a little bit more than that.
It's like when we were, again, you missed last episode when we were talking about Mikal Bridges, but 36 minutes on the court, you can't find the bottom of the basket once. I will never get over that goose egg, but it's kind of like Bruce Brown, 24 minutes of what, cardio? Maybe a layup?
Basically.
Unreal. But I'm staying with another guard, also in the West, recently traded to the West. I'm talking Ayo Dosunmu on the Timberwolves. So if, like things... He's probably, when I was looking through the game logs, like his hit rates are really bad, but the box score is like definition of just being like a hook magnet. He's gotten close so many times, but I'm gonna say you liked Ayo to score over 18.5 points, right? He's done that once in his last 10 games, and again, mind you, that's what his line is staying at. They're staying that high. Not only is it 1 out of his last 10 games that he's gotten 19 points or more. Throughout the total course of the season, he's hit that 25% of the time. Maybe you're thinking, okay, maybe I don't like him as getting all his points, but he's still getting you like around like 15 a night. Maybe I'd take his points assists. Points assists at 22.5 is not hitting 10 games. And again, he's getting like 12 and 5, 15 and 3. He's just not getting to that specifically. But you know what? After that, you're like, maybe the points aren't hitting. The points assists aren't hitting. Maybe I throw his rebounds in there. Maybe I just take his PRAs. Give him a little. Maybe I add a little bit onto my, the total that I need, but gives him a little bit more room. Over 26.5 PRAs, 1 for its last 10. So, You want to talk about a guy that is giving you no profit whatsoever? It's AO. And like again, I mentioned that he went 1 for 10 on his points line, and that one time happened on Tuesday where he had 19 points. But previous matchup, 18 points, 4 rebounds, 0 assists, 12 points, 8 rebounds, 7 assists, 13 points, 2 rebounds, 1 assist. Like the box scores don't look bad, but they're not lining up with the sports books.
You should track this and just bet his under for the rest of the season and see what you come out with in terms of how many times did that hit.
Well, immediately as I start doing it, he's just going to go on the run of his life.
Oh my God, he's gonna be like the most improved player of the year just based off his stretch in March. Like
He's gonna average 55 PRAs in the last 22 games. But so yeah, shout out our players of the week. Good players: Baylor Shireman, Jalen Green, making us money, and Ayo Desumu and Bruce Brown. Stay away unless you're taking their unders. But to get into the meat and potatoes, 37 or recordings at 37 minutes. But to jump into the meat and potatoes of this episode. Talking our NBA playoff pretenders, teams that have looked good through the regular season, but I think have, given you enough doubts to say that is this a team that I realistically think advances out of the first round or can make a deep run in the playoffs. And to start us off, the team that I wanted to address is the Orlando Magic. I don't think they're as scary as people perceive them to be. I know going into the season, this was a team that a lot of people were saying is going to take that step up. I know Franz Wagner's missed a lot of time, but realistically, this team it's kind of like a Timu version of the Cavs. I think there's a lot of talent all over the place, but I don't trust this team to really close out. We've seen them struggle against bad teams already. And specifically Paolo Banchero, I think that a lot of their offense relies on him, and he hasn't really developed into that true like NBA superstar that you want the number 1 overall pick to be. In my notes, I said he's kind of the modern day Andrew Wiggins. He's a guy that can go out and get you like, low 20s a game, but is it really contributing to good basketball? I mean, the Magic are 7-3 without him this season. Their offensive rating and their field goal percentages really don't change with him off the court, but they do get better defensively when he's not there. So if you're asking me, is this team really going to be able to close out against like even saying like the Hawks or like the Raptors? I think that it's you have to you take another look at this Magic team and you question whether or not this team really is a legit threat, and I don't think they are.
I totally agree. Like the Magic are a team that every time I bet on them, I get mad because they just can't close things out, and it's never like a for sure. And it depends on if Paolo is doing well, and it also depends on if the type of game Desmond Bane is having, and if either one of them isn't doing well, I think the whole team kind of falls apart. So Orlando's never been a team, especially this year, that's really made me think that it's too scary, especially without Wagner. If he's back, I think that's a different story of like how far can they go, but I'm not really going to fight you here with Orlando being a pretender.
Yeah, I think they're a first round exit. But what about you?
I would say the same. For my first pretender.
Yeah, I want to hear it.
This is a touchy subject, man.
Let it out.
Right,
let it out.
Going at the throat of the Eastern Conference. Calling the Pistons a pretender and not saying that they're like a first round exit by any means, but I'm just looking at this team as opposed to or in comparison like who they are versus who they are without their best player. You want to talk about Paulo is supposed to be that guy and he's supposed to be the best player on the team. Let's look at Cade Cunningham and just straight up the Pistons in general. Diving into their on and off ratings, especially offensive ratings, it's a 9.5-point difference, and that shows that when Cade is not on the court, like their scoring really takes a dip, and it needs to be on Duncan Robinson to be hitting his threes. It needs to be on Duran to be dominating in the paint. Tobias Harris can play a role, but even he doesn't have a crazy differential that really affects that score. 6.4 box score plus minus for Cade. That is a level, if you keep track of BPM, that signifies that, I mean, if you didn't know about the Pistons, Cade is an integral part of that team. And their record is what it is, largely because of some of the games that he's been able to have for them. And we saw, the team without Cade completely lose to the Nets. So I think that's a little bit of something that does keep me worried. Last week they had 4-game losing streak: Cleveland, San Antonio, Brooklyn, and Miami. I don't think they had any business ever losing to the Nets again. I don't think they have much of a business like losing to Miami. Cleveland, San Antonio, of course, those are teams that kind of give you a little bit more of a run for your money. But I'm a little bit worried on, if I'm a Pistons fan, like God forbid Cade is not shooting the lights out or having his typical 30-point game. What does the rest of your team look like then to pick that up? Because I think that's kind of a problem. If Cade isn't firing on all cylinders for the Pistons to be able to still be that competitive.
I think you can compare this current Pistons team to
Say
the
the team that I'm thinking.
I think it aligns a lot with like the Jazz of you go back to the Donovan Mitchell, Rudy Gobert era, where they were the one
Okay,
seed. A team that
fair.
was dominant through the regular season. Like they put up, they were a good defensive unit, but when you go into the playoffs and you list off your top three players, there's a fall off once you get past two. And I think that's the same thing for the Pistons. Like who would you argue is their third most important player on the team?
Got to be Tobias Harris or Duncan Robinson,
And
and I just don't think that that's
put
leverage.
that
I
big
don't think that's. I just don't think that's enough.
put that big three against, like you got Brunson, Cat, Mikal. You have Tatum, Brown, White. You have Donovan Mitchell, Harden, Mobley. You could go across, probably a solid like 15 teams in the league, and you list off their big three, and it's a little bit scarier than Detroit. And when you're talking about the playoffs, if you can really shut down Cade Cunningham, this isn't a team that is deserving of the number one seed. So I'm fully with you there. And in the most recent weeks, Detroit kind of has showed the cracks in that roster. So when you account for that on top of a roster that doesn't have too much playoff experience, I know that's not really anything you can put into a stat necessarily, but I think that matters. You don't see teams that are very inexperienced go all the way, unless you have a dude that's 7-4 on your roster in San Antonio. I think that's the only real excuse you can give to a team that can go far without that experience. But lack of experience, lack of real overall, I'd say star depth, if that's a
Mm,
sentence you can make. I
it
think that
is.
I think that
It is
does
in this
separate them.
scenario. Yeah, no, it's just I don't see, like, again, if Cade's not on fire, I don't know who is picking up the slack for them. I don't think Duran's going to be the game changer that wins them some of those games. Especially, I don't think they are a first round exit, but I don't think that they're capable of taking on teams like a Boston or a New York.
I think you match up against the Heat in the first round. I would even if the Heat are underdogs, I think there's just value in taking Miami in that scenario.
A team that's already beat them.
So exactly. So I think that the Pistons, they might go into the first round of the playoffs and they might be favored to advance like maybe minus 140, minus 150, but as a one seed it should not be that low. So yeah, Pistons. I love how we're agreeing a lot on our pretenders here. Not too much debate in here, but I don't think necessarily need it unless you disagree with the take I'm about to make. Talking about going to the West here after spending two teams in the East, but I think the Houston Rockets are not set up well for a deep run in the postseason. Going into the year, it really seemed like this team needed Fred VanVleet, which is a crazy sentence, I think, to say, but they don't really have a true point guard outside of Amen Thompson. So, and even then, like he's a younger guard that has struggled in some ways when facing pressure. So I don't know if I love that as your starting guard going into the playoffs, but going further from there, you talk about the Cavs as being a team that has struggled as favorites. The Rockets are right there. I mean, 23 and 34 as favorites. That's the worst in the West amongst teams above 500. Sixth worst in defensive rankings, and a team that doesn't shoot the three ball that well. So if you're not good defensively, you don't hit your threes, and you don't have like a true point guard, I think this is just a lot of Kevin Durant ISO ball, and I don't think he can take you all the way with that.
I think the Rockets have just had some things that are just slightly off, and I agree that they don't have a true point guard. But I think that you have a full season under your belt as a Men Thompson, and you have enough experience to be able to not make the worst decisions with the ball. And I know he's had some games where he has 4 or 5 turnovers, but that's just going to happen, especially while you're that young. Um, Houston to me is a team that if they can just fix some of the minor issues, they are, to me, a very dangerous team to face. Amen Thompson, when he can be on, is a very solid contributor on rebounds, points and assists. That's been a line for him that's pretty high for a guard most of the times. KD, we don't need to talk about his experience. He's got a ring already. Jabari Smith Jr. is a guy who can also step up at random moments and really, really give teams hell, especially from three. And not to mention, his build. He's like a 6'11" forward who's lengthy and athletic as hell. And Şengün, hey, if you want to talk about some guy who can dish the rock if you need, like get it past the front court or get it past back court and give it to Şengün. He's a guy who can also dish out some assists. So that five in and of itself is already to me a little bit scarier than some of the teams that we've talked about here. And sure, they're having some issues at the point guard slot, but they've been dealing with that all year. I wouldn't be surprised if they go a little bit deeper than you're giving them credit for.
My argument against that is I think with every other team there is alternative routes, if that makes sense. Like, yes, the Pistons, a lot of their offense relies on Cade, but they're also a very good defensive team, and I think that makes up for it. But for the Rockets, again, you're not going to find playoff success if you're not either a really good defensive team that can't shoot the ball, or you're bad defensively but you can outshoot your other teams, which the Rockets aren't good at both. So that to me shows that, like, yeah, it is a lot of Şengün under the basket, Kevin Durant, around the free throw line taking his mid ranges, and that just sounds like a fancy version of like the DeMar DeRozan Raptors. So I think, again, a good team. I think they have the names to make it go far, but their struggles are very, very visible, and I think it's going to hold them back overall.
Yeah, and I mean, I'm saying the Rockets are a team that I think could have a bit of a deeper run than people think, but I have also seen their struggles of being able to close games out. And Amen Thompson really cannot shoot the ball, and he's a guy, if he goes to the free throw line, there's a good chance he might go 50. So they have their own struggles, but I think that if they can be firing on all cylinders, they're a team to watch. But we'll go now to my second pretender. And I'm going to highlight another team in the East. It's going to be the Toronto Raptors. They get into this one, Scotty Barnes, Brandon Ingram, and RJ Barrett. Like, I think that that's a name when you hear the three of those on the same team. They're not guys who have really too much playoff experience, but they're three guys that I think if they can, if you hear them, you're like, oh, that could be a pretty solid three and a pretty good three to go against, or, well, scary three to go against. But I just don't think it's translated in the way that a lot of people have hoped. I think you haven't really heard RJ Barrett's name too much this year. Brandon Ingram's a guy that you might see go off every now and then, but overall, the Raptors, in terms of offensive efficiency, are the 12th worst team. And I know 12th is kind of middle of the pack, but I kind of expect more from a trio like that. But where I think they lack the most is their bench. They don't have depth for shit. Like, it's Grady Dick, and it's a bunch of other guys, like names that if you said that to most casual NBA fans, they probably haven't heard of Colin Murray Boyles. Like, it's and then the guy who just got traded to the Nets, Ochai Agbaji, I believe. Sorry, I haven't watched any Nets games because I don't get Yes Network, unfortunately, at my house, so I can't tell when he's in the game how to pronounce that. Um, that was an extent of just the Raptors' depth. They just don't have much to lean on. So, I know I put them a little bit higher in my power rankings when we had that episode, but the more that I watch them, I see a lot of inconsistencies. Scotty Barnes has been very, very inconsistent, especially as of late. Brandon Ingram, if you look at his on and off, his impact off the court is barely noticeable. Some of the even, the typical rebound percentage, assist percentage, those go up when BI isn't on the court. So I'm not saying that it's not a system that can work. I'm just saying that it looks like it has a lot of flaws, and that's going to be very, very exposed when we get to playoff time.
I think the cool thing about the Raptors front, like at least starting five, is outside of Jakob Poeltl, I think the other four could realistically, they could give you 30, and without you,
Yeah.
catching up on you pretty quick. I think quickly RJ Barrett, those are guys that, again, it might have been overlooked now, but quickly 17 points per game is not nothing. RJ's right below
Emmanuel
20.
quickly has stepped up. RJ's like averages have not been bad at all. I just think that the Raptors, where they lack is like when those guys come out, who is your replacements? And if you look at the depth chart, it's not a whole lot of anything that's gonna come in and, like, save the day if God forbid one of them gets hurt.
If they had a Miles McBride on their bench, I think we look at this team a lot differently. Like their starting five, I think, looks great, but like you said, I don't think there's much depth wise there. You have some interesting pieces like Jacoby Walter, Grady Dick. I think those are guys that could make an impact. But yeah, I think the bench depth. I'm not I don't take too many notes off on that going into the playoffs, just because you are going to see rotations get slimmed down a little bit. Obviously, you might be seeing teams go into more of like a 7-8 man rotation. But to your point there, their bench unit when comparing playoff teams across the league is definitely towards the bottom. So it could hurt them, but I think that they have enough explosiveness around that starting five that a couple of good games that changes things big time.
I got no rebuttal against that, really. I mean, but it is a best of or first to four, so it all depends on
I think they'll give a fight
if you slim down, if you slim down that rotation, can they all stay healthy? Because if they can't,
if the Magic face the Raptors in the first round, we're kind of screwed. We get we get a guaranteed win in the sense of like, all right, one of them was fake, but like if you realistically, if we saw a Magic Raptors first round, who do you like in that scenario?
Assuming Wagner's back. Yes.
Assume not.
Assume not. If Wagner is not back, I personally like Orlando a little bit better. I think that there's been a lot of inconsistencies on who is the guy for any certain night for the Raptors. And I think Orlando has had a little bit more explosive moments. Like Desmond Bane sometimes can drop 30 plus.
I support
Paulo
it.
can have if Paulo's on, he can if he can hit his threes, that's a completely different player.
The Magic should be favored, but I might just take Toronto for the value there. I think there might be something.
I agree. I think that's a pretty even matchup.
But let's move on. Last topic of the day. We're going to be talking about our way too early NFL team win props. Again, we haven't even seen the NFL draft, but a lot of things have happened in free agency and some very surprising win totals. We talked about Carolina last week. Nick mentioned that they might be his favorite to walk out of the division. And you look at them at 6.5 wins. Since then, I don't know, I guess everybody, the millions of people that listen to this podcast, hammered the over on that because the line has now gone back to 7.5. So shout out the fans. But looking at it again, like the Panthers schedule, it looks like hell. That was one that I almost wanted to bring to the table today, is one that I would place. But you look at their schedule, and it's a lot of teams that went to the playoffs last year. So it doesn't look good on Carolina's side, unless you're seeing a Bryce Young resurgence. But the team that I actually want to highlight, something that I would be placing today as an NFL fan here, but that would be the Ravens under 11.5. I know it currently sits at -140, but the Ravens, yes, you bring in Trey Hendrickson, an elite pass rusher, and obviously you wanted to pair him with Max Crosby at that time, and I think if you have both of them, you look at this a little bit differently. But outside of bringing in Trey Hendrickson, they've signed, Jalen Hawkins, he was good for the Patriots. Chidobe Awuzie, you re-signed him. You bring in, a backup tight end, a backup center, and a guard from the Jets. That doesn't move me, as comparing to where you lost Tremont Jones, an important edge rusher, Tyler Linderbaum, arguably the best center in the league. Isaiah Likely played a big role in that offense. Patrick Ricard, he helps out that O-line. There's a reason a fullback got that much prominence for so long. So a lot of guys out the door, not many people going in. And again, looking at 11.5, realistic losses on their schedule, I think Buffalo, obviously we saw what week 1 looked like, but you can't say that's going to be a win for them. Jacksonville obviously had a great year last year, and they're looking to build off of it. I think the Chargers have made a lot of good moves this year that do put them above Baltimore. I think that's a pretty crazy take there. I don't think this is a Baltimore team that can sweep the Steelers and the Bengals. The Steelers are notorious for giving the Ravens trouble. And then, so if we're looking at 5 right there, if you want to throw in, I put this category as like teams that I think the Ravens should be favored to win, but if they lost these games, I don't think people are necessarily surprised. And that would be the Dallas Cowboys, the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, and the Indianapolis Colts, because report I saw today is that Daniel Jones saying he should be ready for week 1. So I'm giving you 8 games that they could lose realistically. So I don't know, combination of, I think the schedule doesn't look that great for them, and their free agent acquisitions really not being too massive, that I don't think this Ravens team deserves to have the highest win total out of the 32 NFL teams, or out of the AFC, excuse me.
My take, yeah, I think that line's a little high, and for the exact reasons that you just stated, like they lost a bunch of key pieces in terms of like impact, right? Linderbaum was very impactful, and the fact that Ricard's gone, I feel like he's been on the Ravens a long time,
He went to the Giants, followed his head coach.
and would likely, right? Yeah. So I think that then to boost that win total to 11.5, I mean, assume that Lamar stays healthy. Sure, that could be within the realm of reality, but I think that that's a little too high. And realistic losses, just like you stated, like Jags came off a hot streak going into the playoffs, and barely lost to Buffalo. And then of course the Bills. You think they are coming into this season with anything other than just being so damn tired of making it just like halfway to the Super Bowl.
But the Bills
Like
have made
it's
moves.
just
They made better moves.
they have, and I'll talk about them in just a moment. But yeah, I'm right with you here. I think this going to 12 wins. I think 11.5 is a little crazy for the Ravens right now.
The only other thing I can add to this is out of all of the, I'd say, playoff caliber NFL teams that we know of, out of every single one of them, every year there is one of those like, what the fuck? How did this team win? And it's against the Ravens, I feel like, every time. Like what comes to mind is like the Gardner Minshew Raiders that put up 40 on the Ravens. Like if you even go to last year's schedule, like they kept the Browns in a couple games. Again, I know that you had some Lamar injuries, but this is a team that is notorious for keeping bad teams in it. So I don't know. I think 11.5 is just a little too steep.
I agree.
What about you?
Um, I want to highlight, and not just because they are my team, but Buffalo Bills at 10.5. And I think that this is a team that if you look at what they've lost compared to what they've gained,
Over or under?
uh, over 10.5. Price right now at -130 on FanDuel. But this is a team that, if you look at the season they just had, went 12-5. And what have they lost since then? You did have to and you had a bunch of injuries in that receiving room too. But it's gonna be interesting where Nick Bosa goes. He was just a complete flop, I think, in this year. They let a bunch of
You mean
pieces go in that.
Joey Bosa?
Sorry, Joey Bosa.
I mean, a
There
little
we
bit
go.
past his
The Thompson
prime,
twins.
and maybe
Thompson
expensive for
twins,
the
the
name.
Bosas. Yeah, definitely. But what have the Bills added though in terms of the defensive line? Bradley Chubb, as long as he can stay healthy, something that could be a big payoff for them. D. Alford, and C.J. Gardner-Johnson backing up now a cornerback room with Harrison once he's healthy. Well, he should be good to go, of course, by week 1 and everything. That defense now, while it's not a crazy upgrade, I think that defensive line just got a bit scarier. You've already had Russo, and you've already had Ed Oliver, especially when he was healthy. You keep that momentum going into the season, and now you add Chubb onto that. I think it's something that could be watched. Now, of course, the biggest thing that happened so far for the Bills was obviously getting DJ Moore. I think it's going to be interesting to see how he molds into the system. I don't know entirely how DJ Moore is going to be playing into, unless we start letting Josh Allen really sling it. Two guys who, if comparing to Shakir, kind of or similar frames, but DJ Moore, we have seen in his days in Chicago how he's been able to be a wide receiver 1 caliber player. So I'm very excited to see how that pans out. But you still have Josh Allen as your quarterback, and a lot of the main framework that still made the Bills successful is still there. So I'm going this over 10.5 just because this is a very similar team that just went 12-5, only now with a couple of upgrades in some major positions. So the only teams that I see, you're smirking.
I think I'm gonna let you finish, but I kind of disagree with this.
Okay. The only realistic losses I see, and of course we don't have like a clear timetable return on Mahomes. Chiefs always give the Bills a fair amount of problems. And if he is healthy by the time that they're ready to that they face each other, I think that team is just always possible because they know each other very well. But we'll see how the Joe Brady Bills though compare to what they played against the Sean McDermott Bills. Houston, we saw C.J. Stroud play one of the worst playoff games I've seen of a quarterback, but that defense is still so legit, and the way that they were able to just overwhelm Josh Allen last year, something you kind of just can't forget. Denver was a big one. Obviously we lost them in the playoffs, but they just got a major piece with Waddle, a guy who I wish landed on the Bills as well. And when they meet again, I think this is absolutely a team. Denver's a team with Waddle, especially that can stump the Bills one more time. No way that they sweep a team like New England. I think the Pats, Super Bowl, I was going to say contenders, team that was just in the Super Bowl, a team that they lost to in the regular season as well. You just made it to the Super Bowl. You're not trying to give up, show that you're not that team again, of course. And I think, with that experience, I think the Pats definitely have, a chance to be one of those teams that the Bills can't top twice, maybe even once. We'll see. Because that was a great game, both of them. Logical upsets, though, for me, the teams that where if I see the Bills are favored, I could see the other team winning. I think it's pretty easy to say that Green Bay and Detroit are some of the main ones. Maybe the Rams, but I honestly am interested to see who would be the favorite between the Bills and the Rams.
I think this schedule fucking sucks. Like this is a tough schedule. Like if you're looking at it saying like guaranteed wins, where you could point out guaranteed wins on this Bills schedule. Dolphins twice, Jets twice, you play the Raiders. We're at 5 right there. Every other team, I don't like. I think it's a conversation. Like let's just go through the schedule as it is, right? I mentioned again the 2 Dolphins, the 2 Jets, and the Raiders, right? You have to play the Patriots twice. You play the Chiefs. You play the Chargers, a team that I think is, again, I really think the Chargers can have a case to make it out of the AFC this year, and I don't think that should be looked at twice. The Bears, you just made the playoffs. Again, the Lions disappointed last year. The Broncos obviously made some big additions. You can't discredit the Packers. Vikings went 14-3 with Sam Darnold. They had a good defense last year. Now you add in Kyler Murray. I think there's, it's a game the Bills should win, but I think, it being in Minnesota, you don't know how that turns out. And then you face Baltimore and you face Houston at Houston. You face the Rams in LA. I think this is a gauntlet schedule. So I almost lean the opposite. I think this is a team that should be good, but to be honest with you, the books might have picked this best. This might be a 10-win team. I don't want to upset you there, but
a 10-win team. It could be a 10-win team, but all you need is 11 to get past that over.
That's true. We don't need 12. We don't need 13, baby. We need 11.
We need 11. I agree that there's a lot of names on this schedule that are going to give the Bills a hard time, especially if healthy. I don't know if the Bears necessarily scare me too much.
In the last 2 years, I say 2 years because it's important for some of these teams, but in the last 2 years, every single team they will face has made the playoffs outside of the Jets, Raiders, and Dolphins. And even if they didn't make the playoffs last year, again, I argue competitive rosters that you're still going up against.
Fair enough. And the Bills are right there up there with them. So I think the Bills have been tested most of every game especially that I watched last year.
Yeah, it's not going to be an easy season, but I think that looking at the schedule almost every week, you're going to be like, what's the best matchup of the week? It's probably going to be whoever Buffalo is playing against. But let's flip it back to me here. My last team that I think if I were going to take a team win total, I would take this bet today. It's another line that's sitting at 140. Instead of going with an under, we're going with an over. And I feel like it's to no surprise if you've been listening to the last 3 episodes. But I've come full circle on the Tennessee Titans. The terrible display of a football team we saw on the field last season that was able to squeeze away a couple wins that they very much did not deserve. They've made a lot of great signings in the offseason. They still have some very good draft capital in front of them. And they have a win line of 7.5 right now. And I think that's very doable. Now it does, it kind of similar to how I said about the Bills. I don't think when you look at the schedule outright that there's like guaranteed wins on the board. I think they should win against the Browns, the Jets, the Giants, the Raiders, and the Steelers, because we don't know what the Steelers are yet. I think those are 5 that they should win. Realistically, they go into those games, and I'd say at the largest margin that they're facing is probably plus 3.5. I think they could split against the Colts. Again, depending on Daniel Jones, I think that you could definitely squeeze out one of those. And then possible upsets. You face the Commanders at home, which I know they've made some good additions, but still a lot of question marks there. The Cowboys on the road, the Ravens on the road, which it's crazy that I mentioned the Ravens, but again, a team that every year I feel like has a loss that they really shouldn't get. Like this could be that spot. So I think that if all goes well and Cam Ward takes that sophomore jump and all these new weapons in Tennessee really flow the way they should, especially with the new head coach and OC, I think the Titans. I could see this team cracking 9 wins.
I agree with you. I think, Cam Ward was put through the gauntlet as well just in his rookie year. Like it was not a pretty statistical season for him. But you started to see in the second half, Cam Ward himself at least started to learn from a lot of the turnover mistakes. Titans also just looked like a better team in the second half of the season. Um, yeah, no, Cam Ward was definitely put through the gauntlet in that, like, the first half of the season for the Titans did not look pretty, but I would argue that they looked like a much more connected team in the second half of the year. And you're exactly right. If Cam Ward can take that second step up now, learn from a lot of the turnover mistakes, and every time I think about the Titans, I think about the Cardinals game.
There's important games to mention, and the Tennessee Titans versus the Arizona Cardinals is not one of them, and it is forever in my head.
Right.
He threw an interception and scored a touchdown off of that. We always end up talking. We always end up talking about this game. We always end up talking about it, but I just will never let it down.
The games that you listed as the ones that they should win, like completely agree. And that would, if they can pull off those 5 games, you're already looking for maybe 3 more, and then your upsets against the Commanders, Cowboys. We'll see what kind of defense they're dealing with. I think the Ravens would be an interesting one to see if they can really gut that out. But already 5 games there that look like kind of guaranteed wins, you could almost call them. So I think the Titans are gonna be knocking on the door of at least 8 wins. I feel like 9 might be, not gonna call it a reach, but it's a pretty nice line that I would also feel comfortable playing at 7.5 with the possible ceiling.
Just nodding my head, but yes, no, I agree. I think that, again, do I see this team necessarily cracking double-digit wins? No, and it's kind of crazy to say that. Like, I'm leaving my margin of victory very small here, saying I think they're going to finish with like 8 or 9 wins. But I think
not 10, definitely not 10, but maybe 8 or 9.
Yeah, I mean, because like the division, it's been known as a shitty division, but the Texans defense showed that they can pull almost all the weight needed, and you make a couple moves on offense, that's a threatening team. The Colts were the best team in the NFL until Daniel Jones got hurt. Jacksonville, 13 wins last year. It's not the AFC East by any means. So most of these games, like when I was going through like possible win matchups, there's only one against a division rival. So are they making the playoffs? No, but is this a team that I think gets 8 wins? Hell yeah.
Oh, yeah, 8 wins. Well, I mean, if you want to talk about the AFC, let's go right back into the North. For my team, next team to look at their win total. I'm going with Cleveland's under of 6.5. And Nico and I were talking about worst teams in the NFL before we started recording. And it's an interesting line to see Cleveland, like, I think higher than 4 to 5.5, but it's also because you're looking at some of the teams that are also in that discussion of who are the worst teams in the league. But I still feel comfortable playing that under 6.5 because with all the uncertainties of what that offense is going to look like, still being led by Shador, and you don't know exactly how that's going to turn out. Quinshon Judkins, you don't know if he's ever going to play the same again after the type of injury that we saw that happened to him. So it really depends on like what type of like growth step Shador steps into. Dylan Gabriel still a part of that team. We'll see like what happens with that. But with the teams that I think that they lose to most, right? I'm gonna say 90% of the NFL is gonna beat them. No way they sweep their entire division. Bengals, Steelers, Ravens. I don't know if they win. It's by the skin of the teeth of their defense. And the only team that I think that they beat or that they would lose to as the favorite in their schedule is the New York Jets, of which I think that the Jets could almost be a more promising team than them. When you got Harold Fannon's a big piece, and Shador, if he can take a step, but like, what have I seen to think that the Browns are going to win 7 games?
Yeah, I think it's funny because when we were talking about this before we started recording, and we heard that there's going to be a Jets Browns game next year. I think that's already
Lock that one
it's
in.
going to take some crazy things to happen for that not to be the poop game of the year. Um,
The year.
the year. I don't think we're gonna see two worse teams because the Browns they haven't done much. I mean, you look at it and like, yeah, they've made like 10 signings this offseason. You know, you bring in basically like a rebuilding the O-line. Zion Johnson from the Chargers. I don't know if it's, they gave a dude on the Chargers O-line 50 million. We knew what that Chargers O-line looked like last year.
You better block the hell out of somebody. Like,
So it's like you put a lot into the trenches in that way, but they also, I mean, they haven't had too many guys get signed away yet. I mean, Wyatt Teller, I mean, that's important, but you can replace him there. But David Njoku, longtime Brown, he's gone. Devin Bush, linebacker that I think is pretty important, not coming back. Jerome Baker, another linebacker that played a big role there. So it's a team that you don't. There's no move that they've made that makes me think, yeah, this team wins more games than they did last year. You know, it's not good. Like, yeah, you helped out the O line, but again, your running back's not necessarily in peak condition. The wide receiver room looks abysmal, and Shadur Sanders, from the analytical side of things, was one of the worst quarterbacks in the NFL last year. So who the hell is looking at this schedule, being like, Cleveland, Cleveland for 7, hear me out. You know, like
um,
maybe they believe in me. Like maybe this team beats Baltimore, but no, I can't see a world. You know, like you said, we were saying before the episode started, like who we think is going to be the worst team in the league, and it should be the Jets. But maybe Geno Smith and Garrett Wilson do a little bit more than the Browns.
so crazy to think about it. That we're gonna have like teams like with this many teams, I think, competing to actually be who can actually be the worst between Cleveland, New York, Miami. We're gonna see how Vegas plays out, but that's 4 of which are gonna be contending for like who can cross like 6 wins in the season.
And I don't think it's Cleveland. You could argue that Geno throws the ball like 40 times one week, and they might be able to get a win there. But I think the Browns, they haven't made moves to necessarily like upgrade in any large way. Again, you signed some O linemen, which the O line, it's super important, but when your run game is not going to be what it was, and your quarterback sucks at throwing the ball. I can't take too many shots at Shadur. He had some cool plays last year, but overall he's not. You're ranking 32 quarterbacks. I don't think he's higher than 29. So it's a team that realistically, yeah, they shouldn't hit 6.5. This is one that I'm probably gonna place this bet after we finish the pod because yeah, how the hell does Cleveland win? What does LeBron got to sign? You gonna come back home? LeBron, we need some help on the D line. What do you got in those knees?
Yeah, I don't. I just who the hell does Cleveland have on that roster that's a name on offense? You're like, we got a game plan for him.
Like Harold, I mean Harold Fanning was cool, like you said, but
right.
Oh no, Isaiah Bond. I'm so scared. This is a bad team.
Oh,
And granted, we still have the NFL draft to go through, right? Like, they're gonna be adding some important pieces to it. But again, you can't tell me from the signings that they've made that this is a team that is projected to finish 2 wins better than the year before. You got rid of Kevin Stefanski. Everything about the Browns offseason internally has sound like the meme of like the dog sitting in the burning house saying like everything is fine. You're like Jim Schwartz, your defensive coordinator, very well respected across the league, and the Browns have had a great defense. And when they let Kevin Stefanski go, there were multiple Browns in the room that were saying to the front office like Jim Schwartz should be our guy. You had a couple of guys in the secondary that advocated for it. I'm pretty sure Myles Garrett did that too. So the Browns take that information. They're like, you know what? Our players want to play for this guy. Let's go sign somebody else. So they signed somebody else, right? It was like, okay, you know what? Maybe it's okay. You still got Jim Schwartz as your defensive coordinator. You bring in a new talent here. Maybe things are okay. Jim Schwartz asked to leave. resigns. Doesn't want to be a part of the team anymore. So not only did you fire your head coach, but in doing that, you basically fired your defensive coordinator.
What a disaster of a franchise. Like, imagine if I was a Browns fan.
Browns, Nets, Duke. What a combo.
Yeah, I would love. Dude, college basketball would be my time of the year. I'd be
That'd
locked
be the
in on
only
Duke
sport
the whole year.
It'd be the only thing you follow.
That was Duke doing because I can't.
You wake up and you're like looking at like oh, what hat do I wear today? And it's they're not hats. It's like a Cleveland Browns paper bag. It's a Brooklyn Nets paper bag. And then it's like, oh, I should just throw on the Duke hat. You know, what else should I? what else do I have?
Oh my god, but
yeah,
that's the Browns.
So to recap our way too early win total props, I really like the Ravens at under 11.5 and the Titans at over 7.5. Brooklyn likes the Bills at over 10.5. Who's surprised there? And the Browns under 6.5, which got me joining that too. Miss Nick, although it's funny, I feel like when it's a two-person pod, we end up still just yapping so much more than I think we are. Longer podcast today, but socials as always, just in case you want to see what gets divided up, what we're placing for bets and such. That's going to be like that _pod across wherever you consume your media. It's my favorite way to say the social media tagline there. I always love wherever you consume your media.
That's creative.
And then yeah, that's that from me. I am next week. I don't even know what we're gonna talk about yet. I feel like the last couple episodes I've been like throwing out ideas. I think last episode I said that we were going to talk about maybe projecting NBA awards. We talked a little MVP this episode. Maybe that's what we do next week. Who knows? I'm expecting you to say like, "Oh yeah, I'm excited." Hey Nico, I can't wait for next episode and what we talk about.
Nico, I can't wait to have all three of us in the same call for next episode for the first time in 3 weeks.
I know it's kind of sad.
It's been almost a month since the gang was fully together.
So we'll be back. I think we should do a hoop grid next week. We keep saying we should do a hoop grid. We haven't done one, so we'll see. But socials like that _pod, and I will be seeing you guys next week. And Brooklyn too, if he wants to say that.
For sure, Nico. Nico will for sure be here next week.
Say goodbye. Say goodnight.
Good night.